we're going to create these adorable lovebirds in this soft pastel look. So get your supplies out and I'll show you how to create this piece. We have our two lovebirds here, and I'm going to start with this one on this side, and I have decided to paint this in a nice light pink. So this is not realistic, but it's really pretty. So I'm going to water down this paint. I can try it out in my tester piece here and start coming along the head of this bird. I've marked down with some lines here, some places to put the accents so that you don't have to do that with the paint. And I'd really like this to be lighter, actually, more like this sort of tone. So I think I'm using the Patea, just very light version of it, because it's that kind of cherry red. And it makes a very nice pink. There's also this sunset here if you like it, or I've got this extra pinky in my kit. And you can see I'm just taking some of that paint that's deposited in the tip of my brush and sort of depositing that down into this bird. And I'll follow some of these lines to cover them up with some pigment and try that out here. And we're just going to kind of layer in different tones. Less is more right at first. And now I'm going to just do a wet on wet. I still have a little bit of that pink in my brush, which is fine because I'm making this kind of a pinky tone here. And then now I'm going to just deposit some darker pigment along there, and I want to get rid of that line right there across the top. So now I've got that pink. I'm going to let it dry a bit, and there's some blue in this bird, so I'm using my hurricane color here and coming along this wing. This bird will be blue also, but I'm leaving this space because I want to put a little bit of green tint in there just for fun. Like I said, it's not realistic. And these two are kind of blending together a little bit because they're wet, and that kind of gives a nice look to it. So you can decide whether you want those to be able to touch or wait till it dries and it'll stay in place. So I'm kind of getting a light area in that color down, and then just sort of depositing a little bit of pigmentation along some of these lines to give the texture for these feathers. Put a little bit here. So we've got the groundwork laid here, and then I'll go into the beak. I'll use pineapple and coconut. If you've got a yellow, if you add a little brown to it, it'll kind of deepen, make it a little more of a gold. Depends on what color you want that to be. And if you don't have a black, you can mix this hurricane and the hibiscus, or white ocean and hibiscus together to get a nice kind of gray or black. I've got this extra black in my kit, and if you've got the woodland set, there's that color called shadow that you can use. All right, just kind of getting that eye there. Clear my brush. Now I've mixed up this parrot and maybe a little bit of palm, maybe a little tiki here to sort of give like kind of a more iridescent celadon type of green. And I have that to use over here in this bird as well. Take a little bit of this kind of gold color here and kind of put that neutral in along underneath that wing. Missed a spot here in the feathers, and so I'll get some of those details here. And now I'm going to move on to my other bird. we're using this watered down hurricane here to come across and put a little bit more texture. That'll dry and leave deposits of paint and leave a little bit of texture, giving it that look of the feathers. Watch my stroke here, that way it will actually allow that paint to dry around the edges rather than filling it all in like I did here. And come into the tail feathers like so. I'm leaving white of the paper. I can always go back in and fill that in, and kind of along here I'm going to add some green into here like I did with this other bird, and that has too much blue in it for me for right now, so kind of pull that back and maybe even redistribute some of that pigment there. Now I'm going to get a little bit of this same celadon green and put that in here. It's fun sometimes to paint something where it's not super realistic, and that way you can have a little more fun with color, especially with animals. Birds usually have lots of colors, that's fun, but sometimes animals with their fur, it's like very nuanced in the shading, and we can do something like this where we make it a color that's not true to nature. Now I'm going, see, it's probably still too wet to sort of add in a little bit of pigment along here. Let it kind of stick as that second layer. And I think I'll do the same thing kind of over here. That was so wet before, it was hard to do that. I'm going to go back over this beak here and get a little bit of black for the eye, and I want to make sure to leave a little bit of white there so it's not all completely filled in, and maybe I'll just drop a little bit of that as a shadow as long as I don't have too much pigment in my brush. Okay, just get the end of this feather here. You can see that where I've left the white of the paper, it's giving a certain kind of look to it, very watercolor-esque. So you can choose how much white of your paper you want to use, but I know that when you're first learning, it's very hard to do that. But that's what gives it that nice look. And I like him being a little more textured and her being a little less. So that was my choice, and it's your choice as well to decide what you want to do. So now I'm going to work on this flower over here, and I'm going to take that watered down pataya and kind of come along some of the outside of these petals. And I'll put a little bit of a stronger pigment toward the center and let that set up for a minute. And then I will take this green, and you're welcome to make a darker green if you'd like, and do this leaf, or you can add a little bit more of a green like that. And then I'm using tiki, or tiki with a little bit of black in it, to do my branch. So I'm going to stay kind of around or away from that petal if you just painted it like I did. otherwise they'll bleed together. And so you can see I'm kind of making multiple strokes here. That way I'm not allowing my brush to get too heavy and fat where I go outside the lines, and then I can always go back and kind of fill that in. And I will come along here. Some of those will be green. Now I'm clearing my brush from the brown. Sometimes people are tempted to just say, I'm going to do everything that's brown all at once, but you really can't do that in watercolor. You've got to clear your brush off because it depends on letting it dry. And I'm going to pop in, oh that's wet, a little bit of this coconut to the center. Let me try a little bit of orange and see. Oh, that looks nice, even if that's not super realistic. I love how that looks. And now I'm going to paint these flowers over here, these blossoms like I have in front of me. Like so. And now I'll go in and let's see where I created that little darker green. Make sure your feathers are dry enough. And I'll put a little bit of green on the end of those. Now I'll turn this just so I don't get my hand in it. And pull toward myself so I have a steady hand. I'm using my pinky to drag. That's why I didn't want my painting underneath my hand there. I've got clear paper. This kind of goes off the edge here. So if you're matting this, you know, if you really want it to go all the way to the edge, you can just take a pencil and draw that out to the edge, but I'm okay with it sort of falling off the page here, and then you could put it underneath a mat in a frame and you may not see it at all, which is why I didn't have the drawing go all the way out there. You can see I'm putting a couple of layers in there, and because I picked up my stroke, went like this and picked it up, it's going to leave a deposit in that area and give the branch a little bit of texture. So it's kind of better that you just don't do it in one stroke. That way you get more texture and dimension there. And now I've cleared my brush off. I'm going to kind of connect this pink a little bit. Looks like I need to add some light pink here. And I kind of popped in a little bit of yellow and orange here. And now I will go and do this leaf. Petals. And you can kind of make pattern with your brush here. And now I'll just kind of lighten that up a little bit. It's a little darker than everything else. Pulling some of that pigment, pushing it around, and I think I might just stamp that back. And then this green right here is too light, so I'll add some pigment as a second layer in here. And it looks like I missed a branch that direction, and maybe a little bit more nuance over here as it fades out of frame. I kind of do like a little longer than the lines just to kind of let it fade out. Now I will add a little bit more pop or pigment there because it was so wet it just kind of flowed. And if you want, you can kind of tap in once that's dry. A few of those little pollen areas. And we've got these little feet. Let me try that out first. Want them to look different than the color of the wood so they stand out, but I don't want them bright yellow or orange. They're not the highlight of this painting. We want our eye to go toward these two little lovebirds here. And I'm going to add another layer to the beak and a few little details in here. To add some texture. So now we have our beautiful lovebirds.